So we're looking at the review page in Canvas, and there are the challenges that you can practice. Then they close at, I think, 9:30 on Thursday. So this exam, you don't have to be here for the exam. This quiz, you don't have to be here in class. And it's a 30-minute time limit, taking it online. And you can play the Kahoots, and there's also this kind of summary. So in the summary PowerPoints, I highlighted in red everything that's pertinent to the question. So there's a question about this model, which if we play it, I think, oh, here it is. It's pretty low resolution, huh? Networks, audience, advertisers, that we always had on. Syndicators, FCC, and producers.
Internet video delivery service.
Thank you. So there's a few extra players in this new model, basically. Okay, just remember those. Yeah, okay, station ownership. Remember, you have to be a citizen in order to own a station. Radio or television, that's a terrestrial station. You can be anybody you want to have a website, unfortunately. Lottery or, well, I'm not saying actually our citizens would be any more honest than people in Macedonia stoking us full of like fake news. There's plenty of that here. Increasingly, stations, the FCC distributes licenses based on lottery or auctions. So you used to have to make a whole kind of justification for how what you wanted to do was in the public interest. But now it's pretty much devolved just to money. It's like either they'll auction it off or put you in a lottery, especially in the, like, basically when we wanted our community radio station, we were told like there's only like 2-3 frequencies that are actually viable within San Francisco that don't already have radio stations on them. So it's like, wow, there's hardly any room left in the major markets. Owning versus operating broadcast stations. So we talked about this briefly last week, that increasingly the networks want to own and operate the stations in the biggest markets. And the reason for that is with an affiliate station that has a non-network owner, the split is like 50-50, right? So the ad spots that exist in, for instance, prime time, 50 of them will go to the local station, 50% would go to the network, right? And in a big market like San Francisco, it's incredibly lucrative. So what you want to do is if you own the station and operate it as a network, you can get 100% of those revenues. You're not splitting that with a local station owned by, a third-party station owner group. So they call these O&O, owned and operated stations. They are the most lucrative stations. So if we made a little list as to what's profitable in broadcasting, owned and operated would be the best. Next would be network affiliate, because everyone's watching your ABC, NBC, CBS that's still watching networks. And at the very bottom, you'd have an independent station, which is KRON now, which fell from being a network affiliate, fell down to being an independent station, even though they say, well, they'll have a little My Network logo on their prime time, but that's basically just a package of syndicated and rerun shows that Fox actually owns My Network and organizes that. But it's nothing like, the kind of hype and product you get from the network if you're a network affiliate. Chris?
So really quick, the owned and operated, they play 50% or network.
So an owned and operated would get 100% because you're owned and operated by, for instance, NBC.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
So that was that was what we were talking about last week, was that, Cron used to be the NBC affiliate. They were doing great, and then NBC wanted to buy them, and the DeYoung family sold instead to a third party, and NBC was so angry that they basically have, they pulled their affiliate relationship from Cron, so Cron fell down and became, an unprofitable independent with $800 million of debt on the sheet of the station ownership group. Yeah, it's really not profitable whatsoever. So the tendency is, the networks want to buy the stations so that they can be owned and operated.
Right.
And clearly they've got so much power that if it doesn't work out for them, they can destroy a station, basically. Yeah. So you're probably pretty much better off just making a deal with the network, which is, of course, not exactly fair, I'd say. But it seems like that, has not aroused the government into doing anything about that. So.
Yeah.
Local marketing agreement. So there are limitations on how many stations that you can own. And there are also cross-media limitations as well. If you own a newspaper, you can't own one of the major television or broadcast stations in the same market. And the idea there is to keep down the possibilities of one station owner controlling the entire business in a market. If basically, and with some reasonable logic behind it, the FCC believes that if you put too much media power in the hands of one individual, it can overwhelm a market and create a kind of an ideological bubble, I guess you'd call it. So they have always tried to limit the amount of stations that a single ownership group can own, and also the ability of one owner to have the biggest newspaper in town, the biggest radio stations, the biggest network, basically. So this is the rule about duopoly. So one license owns 2 or more stations in the local market area. This is not permissible if there are 2 majors. So in other words, you can't own the ABC and the NBC affiliate in one market. And so these are things that the FCC will look at when you go up for your license. You're the owner of the station, and if you go up and say, yeah, license me now for an ABC station as well as a CBS, they'll say no. So that's how they can control this duopoly, right? So do remember the term, right? So we've talked about monopoly. Now we've got duopoly, which restricts the ability to own 2 or more stations in the local market area. And then we also talked about an oligopoly, just for vocabulary sense. So that was what we talked about. Basically, the media industries are organized in an oligopoly, which means that you have a more than one dominant player, but just a few. So that's what's happened in the broadcasting industries, where just a few companies own most of everything, and 5 or 6 majors own just about everything. Disney being a great example of movie studios, streaming services, broadcast networks, cable networks, so on and so forth. So there are equally big players competing against them, almost, anyway. Okay, so that's it for duopoly. Let's see. Defamation. Okay, so there's a section of this chapter dedicated to the kinds of concerns that station owners have. And of course, one of those is that you want to make sure, especially that your news team doesn't engage in libel or slander, which can get you sued and cost you lots and lots of money. So the overall category is defamation, false attack on a person's reputation. The person has to be able to demonstrate in court that you've actually done them significant harm. So you can't just say my feelings were hurt. You have to demonstrate that this has cost you, your reputation and your money eventually. So libel is when it's printed, slander is when it's said over the air. Both of those require, proof that you've actually hurt the person's reputation, not just their feelings, with some kind of significant thing. The other is, if it turns out to be true, at least in the eyes of the judge, then it's not defamation. It's simply truth. So that's the other thing. You got to prove that it's not true, and you got to prove that you've been hurt by it. Okay, so these are some of the things that stations want to avoid getting sued, for instance. So here we go. Consolidation has made the market increasingly oligopolistic. So as we define that, that means that there are a relatively small number of companies that own huge tracts of American media. So there were more rules that were designed to limit this type of activity up until 1996. The Telecommunications Act, in addition to updating the copyright rules for the internet era. However, it seems like they've been outpaced, but for now, that's when the rules came in. They also looked at, market conditions and removed some of the restrictions on ownership levels, raised the caps, did things like that. Another thing that should be said here, supergroups, audience consolidation. I mean, the general tendency towards consolidation continues nowadays. Do we get into the actual, okay. Just as an example, the current rule is that you can not own any more television stations than will get you 39% of the, so this is on TV stations, and this is not on the exam, but I feel compelled to kind of teach it. I'm just trying to fill in some of the stuff that we avoided because it was so dull. So we're talking ownership limits. TV stations, USA. So currently, the FCC takes a look at the number of stations that you own or control, and you're not allowed to exceed 39% of the population as a whole. So, they look at, you've got these 35 television stations in these markets. What are the populations in these DMAs? They add them up, and it must not exceed 39%. And you'll see that the station ownership groups, which in some cases are the networks themselves, as they own and operate certain stations. Fox would be a great example. They get right up to the 39% limitation, and would love to go further because these, they have the capital to buy up independent stations and make them owned and operated and make them more profitable to themselves. But this cap holds it down, and so they would love for those caps to be raised again. And again, the whole logic behind having caps is the idea that you don't want to concentrate ownership too much in the hands of single company. Again, Fox has a pretty clear ideological agenda. I'm not saying that the others don't. But Rupert Murdoch, I think objectively, if you look at everywhere that his company News Corp has been involved, has pushed a conservative point of view. And, so he would be an interesting example of, Fox goes right up to the 39%, and their stations typically have a pretty constant and coherent conservative point of view. And so these types of rules are trying to make sure that that doesn't get to 60% or something like that. Although perhaps, we would see similar consolidation on the left. You just never know. However, those are in place now. There's been another interesting development in terms of relationships between owners and affiliates. Station compensation, which in the original days of television, if you became an affiliate, not only did you get to split 50-50 the advertising opportunities in programming, but you also got a check called station compensation, which is basically the network would pay you to be one of their affiliates. With the rising costs of programming, that's kind of turned around, and now networks demand that their affiliate stations actually pay them. Largely, this is due to sports licensing, things like that. If you want to be a highly rated network like CBS, typically #1, you got to pay, billions of dollars over years for professional sports, and so that means you're no longer writing checks to your affiliates. You're saying to your affiliates, look, we give you these sports events that are your highest rated programs, but it costs us so much, you've got to pay us. So basically, station compensation used to go, it used to go from the network to the affiliate, and now it goes in the opposite direction, from the affiliate. So now, affiliate has to pay the network, basically. Okay, so turned it around due to sports.
It's like joining a club.
Yeah, it's got to pay to play, Radio. So the caps in radio were a little bit different. So if we're talking ownership limits for radio stations, in 1996, they removed completely the national cap. So there was no limit on ownership, which is after 1996, Clear Channel went on a buying spree, which didn't work out well for them, but they had over 1,000 radio stations. So they had over 10% of the radio stations in the United States. That's a heck of a lot. So currently, radio stations are still capped in the local market area. So you can have up to 8 stations in a market. So if you look at iHeartRadio, which used to be Clear Channel in the Bay Area, you can count it up. They own 8 stations. They would like to own more. Again, it's the same thing. In the big markets, which are most profitable, you want to get as much of that business as you can. So right now, 8 stations maximum per market is where it is, with no limits nationally. So you do have several groups with over 400 stations about. You got Cumulus, which merged with Entercom, and iHeartRadio, which was Clear Channel. Again, Clear Channel making those huge loans, bank loans, basically to finance buying, up to 1,000 stations. And then in 2009, the economy cratered, and they needed a lot of money to service that debt, and the advertising revenues weren't there. So they started selling stations, and they continued to sell stations. So from over 1,000, you can look up currently, I think it's around 750, 800. They keep selling off parts of their business to pay the debt, which is, it doesn't look good. It definitely doesn't look good when you're doing that, basically. It's like selling parts of your house to pay your mortgage. It doesn't work too well. Sponsorship model, name programmer for customer. Right. I mean, the point of this item is simply that sponsorship is back after, being eclipsed by the spot advertising model. Sponsorship is coming back around podcasting and around websites, which will, for instance, sell the entire site. You can take over a site, basically, or where else are we seeing it? One of my students was working for Amazon for Twitch, and same type of thing. They'll sell, the entire channel will go to a sponsor for a limited period of time. So there's stuff like that. Is this it? That looks to be it. So that gives us a fighting chance of maybe having the answers to the cahoots on this one. So why don't we start with that one, since we just heard it. And the quiz is on chapter 8, 9, and 10. So let's try chapter 10 Kahoot. Thank you all for participating in it. I'm thinking one of these days, no one will want to play the Kahoots, and then it'll be like, oh, okay, I better play. Oh, Lord. Hey, Julian.
How's it going?
Not bad. Well, yeah. We were just playing a Kahoot on Chapter 10, and this is our and 200, 685. Do I have the app? I don't think I do. Here for- Go. How are we doing? All right. Folks are in. I'm in. Okay. Number 3 is in. All right, let's start. These ones, Chapter 10, Station Ownership. 1941 report on chain broadcasting led to the creation of ABC. Oh, if we studied the date. Okay, so it's true. That was the moment that they decided that NBC was too dominant, and so they forced them to split up. Much in the way that senators were threatening Facebook to have to split up because it was too dominant in its field. The FCC will not grant a license to a convicted felon. All right, true as well. So not only do you have to be a citizen, which I was harping on, but you also can't be a felon. 3, a 30-minute infomercial for a skincare system, doesn't really matter what the product is an example of what revenue model? Subscription-based, spot advertising, sponsorship, or toll broadcasting? Okay, so correct answer is 2. So toll broadcasting is still a revenue model. So it's kind of obscure, but infomercials are still like toll broadcasting, where you basically just buy the time on the air, which usually is only given over the, from midnight to 6 a.m. when the station has just time to fill, and they got no network programming, so they got to put something on there. They have to decide, do we get some syndicated shows, no matter how cheap, and put them up and sell advertising around that? You're not going to make much money doing that. So maybe it's more profitable, forget the syndicated shows and just say, well, we're going to, rent you that half hour and you can put up your crazy infomercial. And they wind up making more money that way than if they get some syndicated shows and sell advertising. So that's what they wind up doing. Oldie program, The Kraft Music Hall, is an example of what? Oh my God. All right, great. Sponsorship. We saw the name of the brand in the name of the show. Paying a monthly fee to access Netflix online is an example of what model? Okay. So, subscription, right? You're subscribing to the service. Which of the following is not a component of the broadcast star model? So that's the one with all the bubbles that we were looking at to start with. So what is not part of that? Oh no, can't take it back, Chris. Yeah. That's so irritating when you know the answer and you just hit the wrong one. Okay, so the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. So the FCC is on there, but not the FTC. Okay, so we'll continue on. Next one. Which of the following would disqualify someone from owning a broadcast station? Not being a U.S. citizen, owning more than 5 radio stations, not living in the town where the station is located, not being at least 40 years of age. All right, great. We all know we got to be a U.S. citizen. And this one, owning more than 5 radio stations across the country, anyway, that's not the truth. You can own as many stations as you want, and even within one market, you can own up to 8. Something refers to a station being owned by one company but operated by another. We glossed over this. You'll find out the answer. Okay, the right answer is the local marketing agreement. They abbreviate it as LMA. So remember, the duopoly rules mean that you cannot own 2 big stations within one, with 2 or more big stations within one market. But nothing stops you from, there are 2 separate owners and one owner can go to another. Okay, I'll own it, but you can operate it. Let's make a local marketing agreement so that basically, although on paper I own it, you do everything. And so that is, a possibility that gets around that duopoly rule. Okay, making cable companies pay local TV stations for the right to include the local TV station. We glossed over this as well. So when the issue here is making them pay. Okay, so that is number 1. So retransmission consent. Again, you weren't adequately prepared for this. Good thing we do this. So retransmission consent. Remember, I'm sure you do all remember, that there is the must carry rule, which means that if you're a cable operator, you must carry the local affiliate stations to the major networks. And that's in order to stop you from cutting out a station like KGO here in San Francisco, the ABC affiliate. Maybe you could get a better deal going to Santa Cruz and getting the same network signal from them, But so must carry means that, nope, you're here in San Francisco, you've got to go to KGO. However, KGO has to give you consent, okay? So KGO, if they're in a position of power, could say, no, you've got to pay me for retransmission consent. So this depends on the viability of the station. Some stations are not that profitable and they've got nothing really interesting going on, so they're happy enough to say, you must carry us, so put us on, we'll give you consent. But a station which is a powerhouse in a large market that actually produces popular content could also say, you must carry us, so we're going to give you the choice. Either you're going to pay us for retransmission consent, or we'll give our consent to waive the must carry rule and you won't get us at all. So that's the possibility there. So retransmission consent comes up often in fights with cable operators. So for instance, a big cable operator will, CBS will come and say, you're going to pay us more than $1 per subscriber for our stations. And Comcast says, no, we won't. We're just going to pull you. And so they take off all the CBS stations, and then Viacom says, no, you also can't have Showtime and everything else, all the cable networks. And so then eventually Comcast starts feeling the heat, and it's all about retransmission. Anyway, fights within the business. Something refers to a single entity owning more than 2 stations in a market. 2 is the big clue there. So what would that be? Duopoly, right? Duo, 2. That's good. All right, great. Owner consolidation led to a media market that is increasingly, what word? When you have only a few owners within a business. What would that be? Good, oligopolistic. So again, let me explain that. So an oligopoly is one where there's only a small number of owners, which fits the media market because they keep buying each other up, So owner consolidation leading to an industry with increasingly fewer owners. They own more. So that's called an oligopoly when there's only a few owners. A monopoly would be, one company owning everything. Like Nielsen is basically a monopoly in most of ratings. Which of the following is increasingly being used to select broadcast licensees? So go to the FCC to get a license. How do they attribute it? Okay. How do we do?
No matter.
So this one says, yeah, but on the other hand, lottery is also correct. So I don't know why I couldn't get this to figure out two of them. So, but it clearly says on the slides it's lottery and auction. Okay, so on our test, I'm pretty sure you'll see that the possible choices do not include both auction and lottery. Okay, so probably on our test, the option is auction. So pick auction. But you're looking for either auction or lottery. This type of defamation occurs when the offending statement is spoken. Okay, so everyone got slander, right? Slander is defamation when spoken. Libel is when written. The rule that local cable providers include all over-the-air TV channels in its basic lineups would be okay, must carry, great, everybody got it. That's the greatest name for a rule. To defend against libel, a broadcaster can demonstrate that the defamatory statements are true. All right, good, excellent. All right, so anything we need to review on those questions? I think just the lottery and auction thing will be cleared up on my actual test. Okay. Remember, you don't have to come in to do this next class. You can also do it from home. It'll be during class time. Okay. Where are we going now? Let's go to chapter 8. What was chapter 8? Let's figure that out. Chapter 8 was about ratings. Classic. Okay, pin's up there if you didn't have a chance to join us yet. Nielsen's odometer was first used to measure which of the following? Primetime TV in the 60s, television station viewers in the 40s, radio and TV audiences in the 50s, radio station licensors in the 30s. So, let's say there. All right, good. So, yep, radio stations, it goes way back to the 1930s when they put a little ticker tape inside your radio and they watched where you turned the dials. DMA stands for the options are Dynamic Media Advertising, Dominant Media Area, Digital Marketing Association, Designated Market Area. How come my thing is not giving me?
Bad habit of looking at the screen and clicking on my phone and not looking at the phone.
Okay. Oh, I'm being frozen out here. I know the answer to this one, and I just can't get my...
It is designated market areas.
Thank you, DMA. Why wasn't I able to enter my answer? I don't know. All right, next one up. In a 1 million television household area, COPS is seen in 150,000 homes. What is its rating? Okay.
Total guess.
No, it's not 1.5. I made that mistake last time.
There you go. It's 15. So, easy way to calculate this. Remember that your universe is 1 million, and what did we say it was? 150,000. So you got 150,000. So if you just cross off the zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, because you want it over 100, right? We're looking for a percent. So if you cross off the 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros on the bottom and 1, 2, 3, 4 on the top, you get 15 over 100 or 15%. That's how you would calculate that. Okay, good. All right, radio station ratings often measures audience in terms of, what would that be? All right, average quarter hour, excellent. We've played this before. If a spot advertisement costs 100 and it reaches 1,000 people, what is its CPM? Okay, my phone is saying network is slow. So it's $100. So remember, CPM is cost per, and that mil is one way of saying 1,000, I guess in French. I don't know anywhere else. Cost per mil is so if it costs costs $100 to reach 1,000 people, then its CPM is 100. When Ford pays for half a local car dealer's advertising, it is known as. Okay, good. Cooperative, right? So barter is when they actually, it's not like a 50-50 split. You just trade one thing for another. So stations will engage in barter. For instance, if they give away free advertising time in order for, I don't know, they could get office furniture, they could get exposure in other media, they could do a trade with a television station or a billboard company. They'll trade my radio hours for your billboards. Nielsen's PPM is a portable people meter, a personalized portable metric. It's a tongue twister. A personal portable meter, point of person. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. Everyone got it. Yes, the PPM, the portable people meter. Diary responses can be inaccurate, but ratings based on metering devices fixed those problems. So really it's asking, are the latest techniques free from all problems?
No.
So it is viewed false. I could phrase that better, but the idea there is
You fix the diary's problems.
you fix the diary problems of memory and inaccurate reporting. But there are still, issues with, for instance, sample selection.
Yeah.
Even the PPM, you got to get the right balance of people. So questions continue. Ad exchanges are most common in which medium? Television, radio, cable, or internet? Okay, so the correct answer is on the internet. So let me remind you, as soon as I tell you what an ad exchange is, right? So ad exchanges are businesses which group together websites and sell advertising on those websites. So each website may only have, 10,000 visitors per month or something. But if you get together 100 of those websites, you now have an audience that is as large as a cable channel. And so that makes it now, competitive as a medium. And they give you, as a website operator, a little bit of code. You stick it on your page, and that becomes a little, window in which they can place advertisements across every single website that has that little bit of code. So this is an easy way of taking individual properties with small audiences and turning them into competitive, audiences to sell. It's basically an ad network. During November, February, May, July, Nielsen sends diaries to sample homes around the country. So what do we call that period? Okay, everybody got it. Great. So those are the sweeps, and we'll just before the end of our course, we'll hear about sweeps. We'll hear about the upfronts as they come. Ratings explain why viewers and listeners prefer certain programs over others. True or false? Okay, it's false, right? They tell us that they prefer it by counting them, but they don't tell us why they liked it or disliked it. Okay. Barring an unlikely event, shares are always larger than ratings. True or false? Okay, so almost everybody got it. So here's the idea that you've got, your measurement gives you a certain number of impressions, let's say 150,000 impressions. Then if you're calculating a rating, you're measuring this against your entire universe. In other words, the total number of households watching television in your market. Like let's say there's 1 million of them. But on any given night, they don't all have the television on. Maybe only half of them have the TV on and everybody else went out to do something more fun. So now you're going to measure what's called share. So you're not measuring against the whole universe of every household that it could watch TV. You're measuring against the actual number of households that had the TV on that night. So your rating might be 15% in this case, but if you're calculating share, it's going to be 30% because you're, only half the number of houses were actually tuned in. So this number is always going to be higher than this number because there's always going to be less households actually watching TV on a given night than there are that could be watching. No one has the, no market has every TV household seated and watching every night when the measurements are being done. So shares are always larger than ratings. Okay, which of these is an actual audience measurement challenge faced by online advertisers? So they have special problems. Different means of sample selection, use of different metering techniques, different ways of counting website visitors, perhaps all of these. Okay, good. So the answer is all of these. So different means of sample selection. Some of them put like a little bit of code to give to you to put into your browser, and then they watch you that way. Others work more like Nielsen and recruit you into a group and then monitor you. Some of them have a voluntary you sign in and become a member. So there's different ways of sample selection, use of different metering techniques. It's all of these. Different ways of counting website visitors. All of them are different. Which of the following is used to set online advertising rates? Okay, so these are hits, cost per click, CPT, hits, cookies, click-throughs, click-through rates, caching, CPT. Ugh, whole lot of jargon there. At this point, my eyes would glaze over. What is this? Yeah, good. You guys did good. So hits, the number of hits, number of visits to your website. Cost per click, do they click on an ad? And CPT is cost per transaction. So if they buy something, that's another way you get compensated. The others were not as good. Okay, next up. Audience activity is more important than audience size in mobile or social media ad campaigns. Okay, true, absolutely. They emphasize more engagement. All right, way to go, Jay. Way to go, CJ. Way to go, 8675309. All right, so we got a new game coming up, Chapter 9. And let's go for chapter 9. Where are we here? What am I doing? Where is chapter 9?
Jenny is the next thing.
There it is. I think chapter 9 is the brilliant social media chapter. Okay, let's go for a classic. Okay, 188, 840. All right, we'll start, but you guys are welcome to jump in using the pin that's up there. 12 questions. Which service is considered to have broken the ground for the social networking sites of today? Friendster, Pukeepa, LiveJournal, or Blogger? Okay, whoa, you guys are fast. Friendster is the answer. Blogs can be considered watchdogs of both the government and the media. True or false? All right, excellent. Those watchdogs. Okay. Which of the following describes Facebook? A countertextual interface, a liberal news site, a social network designed to connect college students, a social layer across all of Google's services. Okay. All right, so Facebook is defined as a social network designed to connect college students. Next up. Which of the following best describes Instagram? A video game playing community, a place to store visuals, a microblog, a social network. Instagram is defined as a place to store visuals. Okay. Next up, which of the following best describes Twitter? Microblogging social network site, an open access network, an investigative reporting site, a job search network. Okay. 4 and 1 are both correct. A microblogging social network site is definitely the best answer, but it's also an open access network where you don't have to have verified identity in order to participate. Okay. Good. Something collects pages of images reflecting a mood or vision, called a self-expression engine. Pinterest, Facebook, Google+, Instagram. Pinterest is defined as collecting pages of images reflecting a mood or vision, called a self-expression engine, so the correct answer was Pinterest. We continue on. Next. Whoa. Something is a social network most associated with career and job information. LinkedIn is defined as a social network most associated with career and job information. So LinkedIn was the answer. Something is known for impermanent posting that disappears fast. Okay, Snapchat is known for impermanent posting that disappears fast. Right? Which platform is primarily issue-oriented, where ideas are shared, not photos and likes? All right, Reddit would have been an equally good answer, folks. So got to make sure. So if you got Reddit, you could consider yourself correct there as well. Right.
Still likes.
All right, next up. Something occurs when the ordinary person on the street using social media observes and reports.
Good freedom.
Okay.
I'm showing my press freedom. Take a picture.
What's up? My network is frozen. So okay, citizen journalism. Excellent. That is correct. That's what happens when you're reporting on the street. Being loosely yet incessantly connected with others via social networks is called...
Right.
Okay. Loosely yet incessantly connected is called ambient awareness. What's not true about internet privacy? Woohoo. Digital communications make government surveillance easier. Users feel in control of their data on social media sites. Apple refused to unlock phone of San Bernardino terrorists. If you post stuff online, it may stay there forever. All right, yep. Users feel in control of their data, not so much. All right, there we go. What? I triumphed this time. Okay, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of myself. All right, folks. What say we call it a day? Anyone against? All right, we're all for calling it a day. Let's call it a day. So remember, next class, you can take this at home or you can come in. If you come in after we finish the quiz, we will talk about station operations, which largely, gets into the management structure and the roles in different stations, and then we get into news production, basically, because that's what most stations do. All right, so we'll see you next class, or we'll see you online. Good luck.